This video is sponsored by NordVPN. Take a listen to this scene.
You are a worthless street rat. You were born a street rat. You'll die a street rat, and only your fleas will mourn you.
And now this one.
You were born worthless, and you will die worthless. And only your fleas will mourn you.
It sort of hits your ears wrong, right? Like there's something missing? Now listen to this one.
You are unbelievable. You cannot just break into a palace and walk around like you own the place.
If you don't have anything, you have to act like you own everything.
I think this one works better. And I think this is why the live-action Aladdin works better as a film than the live-action Lion King did. At least for me. It's the difference between adaptation and recreation. To adapt a work is not the same as recreating a work. When we attempt to recreate something, it's very easy to fall flat, because while it's on screen, we are always going to judge its success based on what it's trying to do, which is to faithfully retell the original story in an attempt to achieve the same emotions in all of us. Adaptation, on the other hand, utilizes various aspects of the original property to create a different experience. Think Frozen and the Ice Queen or Aladdin and the Book Arabian Nights. These stories are based off of old tales. They are adaptations, but they also have their own identity. In the case of the live-action Aladdin film, it keeps certain things the same and many other things different. However, unlike the 90s animated film, the live-action take isn't basing its story off of a book that was told hundreds of years ago. It's instead trying to modernize something we are all familiar with. And as a result, when you see this, you're comparing it to this. And when you hear this,
You were born worthless, and you will die worthless. And only your fleas will mourn you.
you're listening for this.
You are a worthless street rat.
It's because of this, film studios working on these remakes typically try to create their own version of the story where possible, staying close enough to the original to draw people in and far enough away to bring something new to the table. When a remake is almost a shot-for-shot recreation, it's asking to be compared with the original. When a remake builds a new story out of the original material, it develops its own identity. And Aladdin succeeded in that effort, I believe. The characters' personalities are slightly altered or entirely different, the story is similar but takes an entirely different path, and it even has some of its own unique musical numbers. The live-action Aladdin film, because it wasn't married to the material of the original, it was free to explore new possibilities and therefore enjoy moments where it was its own thing. And while it definitely had interesting moments that led many to negatively compare it to the original, it at the very least tried to offer something new. The live-action Lion King, however, for the most part, didn't. It tried to keep as many things the same as possible while changing very little, demonstrating what looks like at times shot-for-shot recreations of the original as the scenes progress on by. The film did add some interesting scenes not found in the animated version that offered greater context surrounding Nala and the lionesses during their time under Scar, but where my biggest issue lies with the film is with its smallest change. Something I believe fundamentally breaks the film and makes it much less effective overall, and it came during this scene. Believe it or not, this was the single most important scene in the film for Simba, and I'll explain why. As Nala begins to trip and slide down the side of the slope, instead of continuing to run away, Simba runs back and claws one of the hyenas in the face. This was a vital characterization for Simba, for it demonstrates that despite being stubborn and childish, he is genuinely brave and cares deeply for Nala's safety, willing to put himself in danger to protect her. The live-action film includes the chase scene, but entirely removes Nala's fall and Simba's brave save, resulting in a much less endearing Simba character. For the life of me, I can't understand why terrific character moments like this were removed that ultimately only serve to do one thing: make Simba less likable. Every main character needs their moment to show that they are not just all talk, that if they truly believe what they do, they must demonstrate that. Eren Yeager in Attack on Titan had it in episode 1 while trying to lift the roof off of his mother. Ash Ketchum had it in the very first episode of Pokemon when he stood to defend Pikachu, who had been nothing but mean to him since meeting him. Even the live-action Aladdin film did it too, because they knew that we need a reason to believe in our main character. And unfortunately, The Lion King misses that mark entirely. Simba never proved himself to be anything other than a petulant child, which is a massive shame because the story is about Simba. It's not about Nala, it's not about Mufasa even. It's the story of Simba. And if your main character doesn't communicate why we should root for him effectively, then it falls flat. Imagine if we went to the original Aladdin and removed the scene where, after tremendous effort, he gives the food he needs to the orphans. If we took that away, suddenly Aladdin becomes much less likable, because first impressions matter. What a character does is what makes them interesting. Scar's scheming, Hercules' heroism, Belle's kindness. These are all attributes that need to be shown to us in order to make the character what the director wants them to be. For instance, in How to Train Your Dragon, Hiccup's father is a revenge-obsessed, angry Viking. His anger and resentment towards the dragons leads him and his men to grave danger. However, despite being narrow-minded and stubborn, Hiccup's father is still willing to give up his own life in order to buy time for his men to retreat. This does not contradict anything about his character, and instead sheds light on it. If not for this scene, if not for this decision, Hiccup's father wouldn't be nearly as likable and thus would struggle to be redeemed later in the film. In the case of The Lion King, I was utterly floored when I saw the elephant graveyard scene play out. I had absolutely no idea why I or anyone in the story would even like Simba, why Rafiki had an interest in seeing him be king, or why Nala ever cared about him enough to build a loving relationship. This is the issue I have with how the live-action Lion King was written, and more broadly, this is a symptom of what I think is the issue with trying to retell these stories. If you keep things so tight to the original it can't breathe on its own, then any minor change that's added is at a much greater risk of being scrutinized and creating a ripple effect that ruins the entire character, or at worst, the entire story. But before we jump ahead to that, I want to quickly thank today's sponsor, NordVPN. Article 13 has passed in Europe, which means the internet freedoms of millions of people have been put at risk. But thankfully, NordVPN has given me peace of mind. If you follow the link in the description, nordvpn.com/TOTALLYNOTMARK, and use coupon code TOTALLYNOTMARK, you can get 75% off and protect yourself for 3 years, while getting an extra month for free. Don't let Article 13 or net neutrality dictate what you can do online. Protect yourself with NordVPN's military-grade encryption, enable it on your Android and iOS devices, and my personal favorite, never worry about region locks again. Go to nordvpn.com/TOTALLYNOTMARK and use coupon code TOTALLYNOTMARK to protect yourself online today. Up until now, I've been singing the praises of Aladdin, but it's by no means the perfect film, and unsurprisingly, its shortcomings surface when it tries to stick close to the original material. So let's look at this clip one more time and try to figure out why it doesn't translate effectively.
You were born worthless, and you will die worthless. And only your fleas will mourn you.
Without the exaggerated caricatures certain characters were drawn to be in, these lines of dialogue are much less believable when delivered by a live-action actor. Within animation, a viewer's suspension of disbelief is far more forgiving than when its setting is reality. When we see Aladdin and Jasmine talking atop a roof, overlooking what looks like a demonstration in China after a short carpet ride, it doesn't take us out of the story. Whereas if the visuals of the live action break the rules of reality, it becomes much more noticeable and sometimes jarring. This is largely the reason why Genie looked off to so many people when it surfaced online. In animation, you can afford to be over the top with character acting to enhance the dialogue, but in live action, you need to consider how the dialogue will be received by the viewer much more often. With that said, however, there are tons of interesting changes that work surprisingly well. Most of the new scene additions are welcome and really added something new to the story. In particular, Aladdin's pickpocketing, which, while present in the original, has been used to, what I think, greater effect in this during certain new scenes. This works specifically well because it's a technique that exists in reality and therefore is more impressive when done in real life. Even the Genie, which I would argue is up there as one of the most difficult to cast for, was done much better than I anticipated upon first viewing. In the parts where the script deviates from the original, we are able to see Will Smith put his own spin on the character, like this.
This is a big hat.
No, that is not a big hat.
I thought that was pretty funny. It's also a great example of a joke that works better in live action than it would in animation. The ridiculousness of the hat is obviously a callback to the prior scene, but it also stands in absurdist contrast with the realistic environment and characters around him. I'm not suggesting that this version of the Genie or that this film is superior to the animated one. That's entirely subjective. I'm simply pointing out that this particular direction they took the film in has served the movie better than if they had done a one-to-one recreation like The Lion King attempted to. The live-action Aladdin isn't perfect. In fact, I wish it had leaned more into doing its own thing more often. The film suffered scrutiny when it tried to recapture the original material and was surprisingly competent when navigating its own path. So how would I describe Disney's live-action Aladdin?
It's clumsy, but in a charming sort of a way.
The Lion King was a full-blown recreation with some sprinkles of change. Aladdin was an adaptation that tried to stay close to the original. The strongest parts from both of these films, apart from The Lion King cutting out Simba's defining moment, was the change they brought to the story, which gives me high hopes for this film. When it was announced that the new live-action Mulan wasn't going to feature Mushu the dragon, I, like many others, was...
No, God!
But honestly, after going back to rewatch the original Mulan film, I don't think this is a terrible decision. Now, this is an entirely subjective take, but I'll try to explain my reasoning. While The Lion King and Aladdin all had humorous sidekick characters, the stories also had huge elements of humor and fun sprinkled in before those comedic characters were introduced. In other words, they were consistent with the tone of the story. Aladdin was already funny before the genie, and so was Simba. The tale of Mulan, on the other hand, however, is a tragic, troubled, war-torn path a young girl takes to save her father from certain death. And honestly, I think whenever Mushu showed up, he was tonally at odds with the film's themes. Remove him and the film is a very serious and fantastic war story. Remove the genie or Timon and Pumbaa from those films and you still have large amounts of humor through their main characters and supporting characters. But that's not even the main reason I am hopeful for the new live-action film. In the original, Mushu was the catalyst for every single major event in the film. Who was responsible for the troops going on the move? Mushu. Who was responsible for drawing attention of the Huns in the snowy mountains? Mushu. And that one was entirely by accident, which injects randomness into your story and can be argued was a moment of Deus Ex Machina writing. But my point is, now that Mushu isn't part of the story, it frees up the entire plot to take a different approach. And that's exciting. Going by the trailer, it looks like a very different story too. And I hope it is. To be clear, I don't hate Mushu or even dislike him. In fact, Mulan was my favorite Disney movie for a very long time while I was growing up. And I have nothing against the Mulan film having a comedic touch to it. I mean, that's why all of her friends in the army were there in the first place. But if they are going to reimagine these classic films, I want to see something new. Because these are films that we've all grown up with. Films that have helped sculpt who we are in many ways. And nothing is going to replace The Lion King, Aladdin, or even Mulan for me. That is why I want to see Disney create instead of recreate. We are at a point now where every live-action remake will be met with intense scrutiny for being too similar or for changing too much. But scrutiny and pressure isn't always a bad thing. And if Mulan has taught me anything, it's that the flower that blooms in adversity is the most rare and beautiful of all. Thanks for watching.